Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Peralvis, and this is video number 3 in my Upper Grand District School Board special report. A look at racism at the Upper Grand District School Board and their staff making racial statements to board trustees, and my attempt to solve that problem with the Upper Grand District School Board. A case study. What a title. Okay, so if you've been following the series, and if you're watching this video, you've probably been following the series. I just sent an email to the Superintendent of Equity and Inclusivity, and basically the had a series of questions. It was a long email, a long series of questions, and I don't get any answers to any of those questions. Realistically, none of those questions are answered well for me, except to find out how insufficient the planning for these policies is. And it's shocking. It's shocking. Okay. So after I sent the long email, we were trying to schedule a meeting. The meeting was scheduled and happened on July 3rd, and we're going to get to that in this video, hopefully, fingers crossed if I'm not too long-winded. But I think the setup time or the email exchange in the lead up to that meeting being set is interesting. The meeting was offered to me when I originally sent out my concern about this as we should meet about this instead of with the whole F-Slack group. You and me should meet about this instead of the whole F-Slack group was my interpretation of that. And instead, the superintendent decides to bring her whole team to the meeting. She wants the whole team coming to the meeting. So this is an email exchange negotiating the meeting to even discuss this concern that I have about the racist board staff and the racist trustee. And the racist trustee isn't even the superintendent's responsibility. That's another person. So this is just one very small aspect of this whole thing. It's unbelievable how big this is. Okay. Carrying on from the last video. So I was disappointed that I didn't get any answers to my questions from my big long question. Not even one, right? The definition of racism. I was expecting a referral to a working document, because that's how these things are usually built. You have definitions. The working document has working definitions. This is what we mean by this term, blah, blah, blah. Toxic masculinity means, right? It's not up to interpretation. But in the Upper Grand Board, currently it's up to interpretation. Okay, so I was disappointed to not get any answers to my questions. There were many email exchanges, and the meeting was changed from one-on-one to three-on-one. So here's my response. Good morning, Cheryl. Thanks for the reply. Next Friday would work well for me, July 3rd. If I can have the answers to those questions before then so I can have time to go through it. 1 p.m. is good for me, blah, blah, blah. Thank you very much for your time. And she says, good morning, Mark. Friday 1:30 to 2:30 would work. I won't be sending responses to your questions beforehand, but I'm more than willing to discuss your concerns during our meetings. I will ask Kalinda Klein and Jessica Roden to attend, and will confirm ASAP. They're both OSSTF members, so will officially be on holidays. I will send you a Google Meet once we have confirmed. Here's my response. I don't know why it's not jumping up. There we go. Is there a reason you're not willing to provide me with the answers to these reasonable questions as I've requested? I would prefer a one-on-one meeting prior to meeting with a team of anyone. We can schedule a meeting with a group if necessary, not of necessary, after our one-on-one meeting. Thank you. If you're unable to answer the questions, or is there someone else I should be speaking to? I meant if, not of, in the last email. Thank you. Cheryl's response was, we can discuss your questions when we meet on Friday. I think she thought I was a student. I'm not. Back to this. And then she follows up with, I appreciate your request for a one-to-one meeting. In order to provide you with the most fulsome answers to your questions, I would like the Equity and Indigenous Education team present for the meeting. At this point, I was feeling frustrated, so I emailed the trustees to ask them for their help. The trustees' side story is the side story I was alluding to in the last video, and that's with the trustee from the Wellington North. And it's a very interesting story, and it's worth its own video. So we'll do that tomorrow probably. Or after because I'm going to compare the old equity plan to the new equity plan. That's going to be another video we're doing. But this trustee side story is jaw-dropping, is more jaw-dropping than some of the other stuff in here. Anyway, back to this. I was feeling frustrated, so I emailed the trustees. You can read that. Here's my response to the superintendent. Hello, Superintendent. I'm disappointed by your casual dismissal of my request. Demanding your staff return from vacation to meet with me seems unnecessary when you could collaborate to answer these questions before the meeting. Send them to me and we could discuss the answers without your staff at the one-to-one meeting I originally requested. The meeting you suggest suggested, quote, without the rest of the F-Slack group. I didn't realize that meant a meeting with your whole team. I would like to understand your reasoning for not answering my questions before the meeting, or at least attempting to answer the ones you can prior to our meeting. Again, I'd like to be prepared for meetings. I like to be prepared for meetings, and your rude dismissal of all of my requests is extremely disappointing. Looking forward to the Google meeting invite. I was at this point pretty much convinced that I wasn't going to be getting an invite to a Google meeting, and that the whole thing was just going to be ignored. Like, oh, I've got some other thing that I've got to do and I can't meet with you. That's what I was expecting to have happen. What happened instead was, here it is. Good morning, Mr. Peralvis, me. Kalinda Klein and Jessica Roden will not be able to attend the meeting on Friday. Below is the Google Meet link for our meeting on Friday, July 3rd from 1:30 to 2:30. And I say, thank you for the update. Hold on. Got to jump up. This is kind of annoying. I apologize. Thank you for the update. Looking forward to it. Was there a public consultation about this change in policy? I can't seem to find it. If there is one, could you send me the link? I understand it was approved just last week, and this is June 26. Also, when should I expect the answers to my questions? I assume you'll be getting them beforehand as you need your staff to answer, and they'll be on vacation shortly. Thanks for your attention to this. Mr. Peralvis, the equity plan is not a plan or policy. There is a separate equity and inclusion plan, which is up for review next year. The equity plan was created and vetted by the equity committee numerous times and superintendents. It has gone out to all the many community agencies and the Upper Grand District School Board that the Upper Grand District School Board works with. As indicated in the presentation, it's a fluid plan and will be altered as needed according to these consultations, recommendations from surveys, meetings, and trustees, and the work happening in the board. I will be providing answers to your questions related to the equity plan and the work we are doing at the board at our meeting on Friday. She did not. It's very interesting about the equity plan. Here's a link to the page comparing the equity plans developed by these people. The 2019 plan is vastly different than the 2020 plan. They have no definitions. I've already told you this, so I'm going to carry on. This is June 26th. I said, is there a full working equity plan, something I can look at? Is there a link or PDF that you can share? Can you give me any rationale at all for ignoring my request to have the questions answered beforehand? As I stated in my original email, I like to be prepared for meetings. Those questions will help me be prepared to discuss the issues and not waste your time. Thank you for understanding. Cheryl says, hello, Mr. Peralvis. Here's the link to the Equity and Inclusion tab on the board website. All policies related to this work are available through this link. I'm not ignoring your questions. I believe our time is better spent discussing the questions, so I fully understand what you're asking and how they relate to the work being done in the Upper Grand District School Board. No, I had a very robust list of questions. Please watch the last video if you haven't seen it, or read. And it is inexcusable to first say, oh, my staff need to be present so I can give you the good answers to the questions. And then when the staff aren't going to be present, no, it's better to talk about it. Garbage. Anyway, back to this. Here's a link to the, okay, so there's links. I said, thank you for the clarification and the link. Looking forward to our discussion. Okay, so moving into, here's the discussion. I had my meeting on July 3rd with the Upper Grand District School Board Superintendent. We discussed a wide range of topics related to critical race theory and the Upper Grand District School Board's equity plan. I'll highlight my recollection of the meeting here. The audio recording that I would typically make and reference failed this time, so this is my imperfect recollection from my notes. Apologies if there are any inaccuracies. We began the meeting pleasantly. I gave context around the experience I have with having difficult conversations to give context for the reader and you guys. I've negotiated union contracts for multiple unions. I was a union steward and helped employers meet with employees. These meetings would usually be about performance issues or whatever. In addition to working as a union steward and contract negotiator, I worked as a youth care worker and was expected to deal with varying degrees of difficult conversations. So this conversation did not intimidate me in the slightest. I wanted to be honest about what was happening, and I wanted to solve this problem that I've identified in the board. I put a case together that basically outlined that the board is ignoring their own policies and their use of critical race theory in developing policy plans. I put a case together that basically outlined, I discussed the Britannica definition of critical race theory. And you can see an image down here. We've gone through that. You can watch the critical race theory video that I put up yesterday if you're interested in that. Both of these definitions directly blame white people for the perpetuation of marginalization of people of color. The definition of discrimination by the board is referenced in their own policies state discrimination here is unfair or prejudicial treatment of individuals or groups on the basis of grounds set out in the Ontario Human Rights Code. Example, race, sexual orientation, disability, or on the basis of other factors. Discrimination, whether intentional or unintentional, has the effect of preventing or limiting access to opportunities, benefits, or advantages that are available to other members of society. Discrimination may be evident in organizational and institutional structures, policies, procedures, and programs, as well as in the attitudes and behaviors of individuals. Yes, and we've got it on video where a board employee has a 2-minute long racist tirade to the trustees who then applaud her. Odd, don't you think? Okay, back to this. Would it be unfair or prejudicial to claim that all systems built by white people are inherently racist? I believe that it would be. Is that an appropriate statement for an Upper Grand District School Board employee to make, particularly one who is in charge of the school board equity plan or who's an educational lead? Would it be unfair or prejudicial to claim that all policies, if they aren't explicitly anti-racist, are upholding white supremacy? I'm still not sure what that statement means in the context of the board, particularly the part where she says that that will become part of the language. In response to this line of questioning, the superintendent stated that critical race theory would not be referenced in any policy documents. The only time it was going to be used was in training administrators or teachers. I asked for an assurance that critical race theory would not be used in developing policy and did not receive a direct answer. Here's the resources recommended on the Equity and Inclusive Education page on the board's website. I'm going to skip the bit of stuff on how to be an anti-racist, but suffice it to say, How to Be an Anti-Racist is a racist book. Back to this. The superintendent then asked me to agree that people of color had not had anywhere in the world to thrive, that the whole world had been built by white people, and that we should really be allowing people of color to be a priority. I can't remember the exact wording here. After I picked my jaw up off the floor, I responded by pointing out that large parts of the world had been settled and run wholly without white people. I asked her if Japan was run or influenced by white people, or China, or India. I reiterated that it was important that we have perspective about blatantly false statements. And honestly, despite having questions like, what does the board mean by race as a social construct, highlighted and part of my plan to prove the discrimination, this question was not definitively answered. I tried desperately to get them to give me the definition or tell me what they mean by that kind of stuff, and they either wouldn't or couldn't. I think probably couldn't. Back to this. I described the board's support for Black brilliance and anti-Black racism subcommittees in school and within the context of having those voices represented when crafting policy like the school board's equity plan. Backgrounder, this was from the June 24th meeting where Kalinda Klein and Jessica Roden were encouraging parents to join subcommittees. That was it was advertised as a parent's opportunity to come and offer their feedback about the anti-Black racism plans. Okay, so I attended that meeting. Back to this. I asked for an example of other groups in schools or other subcommittees that would have input into the school board's equity plan or groups in school. I also mentioned a separately staffed Black Brilliance group that was focused on academic success for Black students. The list she gave me included LGBTQ, social justice, community agencies, Métis, Inuit Advisory Council, Mental Health Advisory, SpecEd, FSLAC, despite being told by Trustee Ross that this was outside of the scope of FSLAC. Apparently, the superintendent agrees. Or doesn't agree, excuse me. I said that I appreciated the list she gave me and stated that she gave me a list of stakeholders within the board for the subcommittee, but that she did not answer about the school groups, nor did she give me any examples like anti-Black racism or Black brilliance. I asked for an anti-Asian racism or anti-brown or anti-white racism or Asian brilliance or brown brilliance or white brilliance groups examples. She said that she did not have any. I said, okay, let me make it more direct. The board enthusiastically embraces Black brilliance groups and is pushing for staffing for such a group. The group is focused on academic achievement and is meant to be supportive and positive thing for all. Could a student approach an administrator and start a white brilliance group? It would behave in exactly the same way as the Black brilliance group. At this point, she got visibly uncomfortable. She said that she thought a white brilliance group would need a lot of careful consideration before being allowed by administrators. I referred to my earlier point about discrimination directly affecting the opportunities for all, and that this is potentially an example of that. I said that I worked in schools and understood that administrators of the school would steer the student to remove the white from the name of the group and encourage them on. I said if students are allowed and encouraged to have a Black brilliance group, why aren't they allowed and encouraged to have a white brilliance group? Why does it have to be racial? She asked if the student's idea was to exclude anyone from joining the group, and I said that the students in the hypothetical group don't want to exclude anyone, and everyone is welcome to join. The point of the group is the same as the Black brilliance as the Black Brilliance group, though, it's to celebrate white brilliance in just the same way. We talked around this for a while. She did not want to commit to allowing one. But she said that I knew she wouldn't be allowed to allow such a thing. And that's very true. I've actually been around at St. Mary's. I could probably give you the year, 2011 or 2012, when a group of students approached and asked for their own group, and they were white students or European, and they wanted a group identifying that, and they were shut down by the administrators. And it wasn't about white or anything to that effect, but it was too pro-European, and the administrators shut it down. And they encouraged them to have the group, but just not have that in the name, and that was the whole point. And it was a huge thing. And the point I'm trying to make is it shouldn't be racialized. We should have a student brilliance group, not a Black brilliance group or a white brilliance group. The argument is lost on you if you think I'm arguing for a Black or a white brilliance group. The point I'm making is segregating it by race is a terrible idea. Okay, back to this. My main point after this was that things like this, like academic brilliance and support, shouldn't be doled out by race. They should be doled out by need. Making it about race adds complexity that is unmanageable and inappropriate. I was pushing for the definition of racism, and the superintendent gave me 3 examples. 1, track and field during Ramadan. 2, the number of brown students in South Guelph who do not have brown or Black teachers. 3, there are students in the system who have not had their last name pronounced correctly once this year. In response to this one, I asked her to pronounce my last name. She couldn't. I told her that was not an example of racism. We both laughed. And we did. It was a fine conversation. There wasn't anything really combative about it other than probably me wanting answers and her not being able to give them to me. I asked if it was really racism when demographics spoke much more accurately to those issues. 1, I'm not as well versed in Muslim holidays to discuss the issue intelligently on the fly. The superintendent asked if I thought it was fair that track and field happens during Ramadan. She said, we wouldn't do that over Christmas. I agreed and said there must be some reasoning behind not being able to move track and field that is not based in racism. However, she was confident that racism explained it, or at least racism explained why the planning committee was resistant to moving it. After thinking on this and a bit of research, as I mentioned this in my reply posted below, Ramadan in 2020 was from April 23rd to May 23rd. There is good reason in a tight school board calendar for resistance to moving a week-long event or things like track and field. I also asked for a percentage number of impacted students in Guelph. They didn't have that number. Number 2, the superintendent said that she had a high number of students in the south of Guelph that had darker skin, but had a high percentage, 93%, as per the June 16th meeting, the trustee meeting, of Guelph teachers are white. She asked if I didn't believe that was racism. I said, absolutely not. I said, the first place, even if you could hire based on skin color, which everyone is aware that they can't, but even if they could, they still wouldn't be able to move those teachers to the schools they want due to the rules in place for filling positions. Regulation 274, if you want to look it up. Okay, here it is. There's a link if you want to check it out. Link will be in the description. Then I informed her that I had been a youth care worker in the board and that 90% of the kids who are having trouble in classrooms are males. And that's not a source stat. That's just me. And I worked in mental health for 15 years. And let me tell you, more than 90%, higher than 90%, boys. And the girls who are in there are certainly not a small deal. They're certainly represented, but majority of time, it's a boy. Okay, back to this. Okay, so the majority of males are having problems in class, yet they have no access to a male support worker. By the same rules, by these racist rules, the board is extremely anti-male. I asked her if she believed that the board were rampantly, systemically anti-male. She agreed that it was a big problem and that males just didn't apply to the job. I thanked her for proving my point, that the board is struggling to hire competent teachers and that trying to shoehorn in a race-based exemption is not making things more fair. I underline again that people should be judged by their actions and who they are and not by the color of their skin. She asked me then what happens if her as a principal or an administrator favored a white colleague by encouraging them to apply for a position over a brown or Asian or Black colleague if both colleagues were equal. I said that it would depend on her motivation. If she were making the call based on skin color, then of course that's racist. But if she were making the call to satisfy needs of a school that one had over the other, then I would attribute it to deeper pool of white talent based on the board's 93% white teacher statistic from the June 16th meeting. It would be equally irresponsible for you to improperly encourage someone who isn't ready just because they have a skin color the board is looking for. Further, making the case against racializing things like hiring or academic support. There were other things discussed. All-use bathrooms. I was concerned that they were going to remove gendered bathrooms entirely. The superintendent assured me they were not intending on doing that. I asked what disrupt access to sport programs and trips due to socioeconomic status, sex, gender, and ability. This is found in the 2019 to 2022 equity plan. And we're going to go through that in a different video because this is disrupt, right? And they're going to disrupt the trips. Where is it? Disrupt trips. They're going to disrupt access to sports programs and trips due to socioeconomic status, sex, gender, and ability. So, I just don't think that that's appropriate language for a plan. That's not much of a plan, right? Disrupt how? In what way? For what purpose? For what cause? She also said that the school wanted anyone to be able to try out for any sport. I told her that she was going to run into trouble not when the girls are trying out for the boys' football team, but when the boys who don't cut it in track and field, in males track and field, are trying out for the girls' team with a view of getting a scholarship. This is happening and has been stopped in certain states already. She was enthusiastic about having anyone be able to try out for anything. I asked her what happened if the girls tried out for the boys' team and didn't make it. Who's to set the standard? Isn't the standard itself against the inclusionary theory that is being pushed? She enthusiastically agreed with me. I think she thought that we agreed. I was just trying to show her how it's a slippery slope, that when you remove all distinctions, right? Like if the coach can't say you're not good enough to be on the team because you can't run this fast in this amount of time, what do you have? You don't have a football team. You don't have a football team. That's certainly true. Okay, 21 minutes already? Holy smoke. I'm going to have to cut the video off here. I suppose tomorrow I'm going to get into the rest of the emails. We get into discussing the definitions of racism, and this is where we find out that these are undefined terms. But it took a month of emails back and forth and long meetings and being able to coordinate and fight through being shoehorned into a meeting with 3 people who are going to explain to me why this isn't racist. But it's racist. It's racist. It is not appropriate to have a staff at the Upper Grand District School Board who's in charge of inclusivity and equity to have a 2-minute long racist rant at the board trustees. I don't care if the board trustees clap at the end. That's not appropriate, and it should be dealt with appropriately, and I don't think it has been. The next video is going to get into the follow-up emails, getting into the lack of definitions and the fact that Martha Rogers is fully aware of this situation and doesn't care. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com, check out CanadaReport.co, and keep watching for my videos because, like I said, at least 5. Now I'm thinking it's going to be closer to 7. Let me know if these are too long. Thanks for watching. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.